Been a long time in the making, but the Rick Beato signature is finally here. Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. Let's just go ahead and get straight into it today, guys. I could tell you that this new model was a blending of his early 2000s double-cut Les Paul Special with the P100 pickups. And initially, he told Cesar no, he didn't want a signature guitar because he doesn't do endorsements. But let's face it, there's already 3 other channels that have posted the exact same video. So I'll just let Rick tell you all about that. But Rick Beato has a YouTube channel that's very popular. He does Instagram, all the other stuff, but he's not just a YouTuber. Like, he's a music educator to begin with. So if you're not familiar with his work, go ahead and check it out, because I'm sure you'll at least find one video you like. But September 13th, 2022, here we are, the official launch date for this model. So let's go ahead and get it out and get our first impressions here. All right, so we've got a blue double-cut Les Paul, exactly what we were expecting here, and I'm really happy they decided to throw a case with these things. So there's a few different topics we can talk about today. A, is it a good guitar? B, how's the price? And how limited edition is this thing actually going to be? All right, it is indeed a very, very thin satin finish on this thing. I can imagine these things in the future will be hard to find in mint condition, because this is the kind of finish that rubs away almost instantaneously if you actually start to play this quite hard. There is no glossiness to this at all. It's almost just like the raw mahogany, because they don't have any of the grain fill either. But that works really well with this blue finish that they decided to call TV Blue Mist. Now, I mean, it's kind of like Pelham Blue, yes, but it's different in the fact that you can see the wood grain. And that's what TV kind of means in here. I mean, you can argue all day what it actually means, but if you have a TV finish, you're going to see the wood grain kind of like you're seeing right here. And I'm really glad that they decided to leave the binding on it, despite the rest of the guitar being a little cheap in that aspect. But let's talk price point on this thing. It ended up being $2,000, which I'll be honest with you guys, I thought this release was probably going to be like a $1,200 guitar, but with the artist premium added onto it, probably $1,800. That's what I was seriously thinking. So $2,000 really kind of caught me off guard. If I didn't know Rick Beato or anything, I just picked this up at a shop and I felt it. This honestly feels about like an $800 Les Paul Special that we saw back in 2018. I mean, it's kind of cheap feeling. But they were saying that they made these bodies extra thin. They were saying 1.5 inches. And it does feel a little bit thinner than normal, and it's incredibly light. Those were 2 things that Rick actually wanted this guitar to be. Because I've actually got one of the Guitar of the Week Juniors over here that's essentially the exact same thing. And I'm noticing, you know, this body is even a little bit smaller than this one. I mean, they were saying 1.5 inches. That's what this one measures. So I'm really going to have to measure this guy. So far, I think the biggest difference I see is this one's a little bit blockier, whereas this is really rounded off on the edges, and I think that's what makes this one look so much smaller. However, if you're put off on me saying this feels like an $800 guitar, there's a little bit of a bright side to this. Rick is actually donating all the money he's making from this particular deal to Save the Music, which is a charity that helps get music programs back into school. So that is really cool. So, I mean, if you complain about the $2,000 price tag, you just kind of look like a jerk when they're doing stuff like that. I love the fact that this is kind of Gibson branching out into uncharted territory for them, an influencer model, I guess you could say. But now your biggest question probably is, how limited is limited on these things? Unfortunately, I have many sources at Gibson, and none of them can actually give me a real number. They will tell me that it is limited edition, but they're not saying how many. So I was kind of thinking these are going to be like the Captain Kirk Douglas SGs. They're going to be in production for a whole year or whatnot. However, these things sold really well on launch date. I can't find any of them available for immediate shipment anywhere. Sweetwater's listing actually says, hey, we're not making any more of these. We've already sold all that we were allotted. That makes me think, okay, maybe it's a little bit more limited than just limited. So if Gibson's testing if Instagram and YouTube guys can move product, I mean, so far it seems to be a pretty big success. So I guess time will tell on these. But let's see, do we have any fancy case candy here? It does not appear so. Come on, Gibson. We can't get a little picture of Rick over here. I guess let's not count them down and out yet. Let's actually take everything out. So we've got the basic strap, the owner's manual, Gibson multi-tool, warranty info, polishing cloth, case keys, and hey, at least we still get the baby photo. So first impressions, honestly, a little bit let down. However, you know, this is the way Rick wanted it. He wanted it just like his early 2000s one. So I think in that aspect, yes, they did a fantastic job. But let's go ahead and throw this thing on the workbench to take an individual look at its parts and specs before we get to a tone and playing sample. Inside the Rick Beato here, let's check out our pickups. So it's just your regular P90 soap bars, labeled rhythm in the neck and lead in the bridge. And they've got your pretty basic routes right here. You can see the long tenon going through there, and then a couple of markings right here that are kind of hard to read. Now these P90s utilize a base plate, and they just secure using 2 screws right here. And then we have another 2 right here on this particular example. Then the P90s themselves, they utilize springs and screws to set the height adjustment. The neck tenon is nice and tight on this one. Sometimes you can find some gaps on the examples. There's a little bit of a chip out of the wood. I'm not sure if that's intentional or not, but that's all covered by the pick guard. But as far as the readings, it's 8.05 in the bridge, 8.15 in the neck, and the middle for fun, 4.05. Bridge and tailpiece wise, it's your standard Gibson stuff. Lightweight aluminum Nashville style bridge, API branded. That has the hex adjustment if you want to use that instead of these. And then an ultra lightweight tailpiece, also done up by the same people. Just in case you don't know, this is based on the 1958 Gibson Les Paul double cut. You had the juniors and the specials, and then in 1958 they decided to horribly disconfigure them by making the double cutaway shape. I've kind of grown to these over the years, but originally these had wrap tail pieces. However, in the late 80s, early 90s, a little bit even in the 70s, they started to reissue them with the stop bar 2 pneumatic bridge because, you know, better intonation and things like that. And there were tons of budget models in the 2000s that had a very similar setup. Double cut and single cut Les Paul special variations, as well as the juniors. So far, nothing too special, but it kind of looks cool without the pick guard on it. That's clean enough that you could potentially leave it off. It just kind of depends on the example. But let's take a look at that pick guard while we've got it off. It's just your regular double cut style, multiply, black, white, black, white, black. So it's looking nice and fancy here. And just in case you want to mess with this thing, you can indeed fit mini humbuckers in one of these if you wanted to try something new. In fact, I'm kind of surprised he didn't mess with the pickups or anything, but he said he really liked P90s, and I agree, P90s are fantastic. But let's check out our controls here. Very basic. You've got your volumes for each pickup, you got your tones for each pickup, and a 3-way toggle switch. Well, let's get a nice close-up shot of this particular finish. Essentially, it's just a metallic blue finish, so very similar to Pelham Blue. And yes, you can see the wood grain, but it's just because they didn't fill it in. Like, a true TV finish is really cool to see in person because it's glossy. So it still looks like this, but it just has like that gloss clear coat over top of it. So it's kind of interesting. It's got a very nice vibe. According to my calipers, this measures 1.485 inches. Now that's going to vary kind of depending on where you gripped at, but it is slightly below the 1.5 that they were talking about. Whereas my other double cut definitely measures almost that full 1.5 and sometimes even more than that depending on where you take it. So it is a little bit thinner, just like they're advertising, even of these already thinned out models, as compared to like the 58 historic version of this guitar. But really just take a look at how blocky this one is. It does not have much roundedness to it, whereas Beato's is definitely very rounded. I wonder if that's intentional or if the sanding guys are just getting a little bit crazy on these. Or was it the Henry J era created ones that they just didn't do enough sanding? I don't think I've ever had a historic version of this particular guitar, so I can't really comment for sure. So it's a rosewood fretboard. You've got your acrylic dot inlays. They did indeed bind it, which I think is a saving feature of this one. But you've got the 22 medium jumbo style frets, 24 and 3/4 inch scale length, 12 inch fretboard radius. But how about our neck specs? 1.68 inches at the nut, 2.08 by the 12th, 0.83 at the first fret, and 0.92 by the 12th. So that is definitely a skinny neck. Here's that neck profile at the first fret and the 12th fret. Just a nice slim C shape. And it looks like we've just got our basic nut on here, not like a bone one or anything. Then the headstock, it's pretty plain. I wish they would have at least did the gloss finish like in this area, but he probably just wanted it like his original one, so that's cool too. Les Paul special, all satin over. You've got your vintage style tuner buttons. This really reminds me of the latest Billie Joe Armstrong signature model. Everyone was complaining when those things were $1,600, so imagine what they would say to this one some 4 years later. I'm sure inflation has a little bit to do with that. But hey, I like his truss rod cover. He's got his signature right there, and that's the only thing that says Rick Beato on this guitar, so I can respect that. Some signature guitars, the artist gets a little bit too crazy, but I think he understood this perfectly. He wasn't in this for the vanity. He just wanted the guitar that he's always seen in his head, and Gibson wanted to make it. So he made it a win-win-win. Charity wins, he wins, and the fans win if they want a guitar that he likes to play. You can see some interesting markings in here, and our truss rod is perfectly fine. All right, now we can move on to the backside. We've got some additionally beautiful wood grain back here as well. I mean, that's going to vary example to example. So I would suggest shopping around. However, as I was telling you earlier, finding these in stock at a store, very, very, very difficult. But I'm honestly really curious, who's buying these? Are they the resellers or are they fans of his show? Time will tell, but we've got Gibson branded pots here. We've got orange drop capacitors, and the wiring appears to be pretty clean. And the output jack is located on the side, and they're utilizing the large strap buttons. Not quite the same as the 2014 style, but it's like their new semi-locking, not exactly locking strap button. And it looks like they might have carved the heel away just a little bit more on this model than usual, because he was saying how he liked to play on the low E string all the way up here, which isn't something you hear a lot of people say. I mean, you gotta really know your stuff to be playing up here, and that's why he prefers this whole double cut body shape, so maybe they did a little something there for him as well. The neck has that whole very, 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 very thin finish. Like, I'm serious. If you play this with like sweaty, grubby hands for just a couple of gigs, I think you're going to see this finish come off. Now, that's kind of cool because it's going to wear like his original, but if you don't want it to, that's when you're going to get into some troubles. In fact, I would suggest taking a little bit of polish and really going to town and turning this into a semi-gloss finish before you really play it if you're scared of wearing the finish down. I can't tell you what your sweat acidity is like. I mean, you're either going to naturally buff this into a gloss or the finish is just going to get rubbed off. But here we can see those tuners that we saw on the top side and our serial number. What's really crazy about these is if you look at the serial numbers at some dealer shops, I mean, they've had these ready for a while. I mean, this one's a fairly recent one, but I've seen some like at the beginning of 2022. I've heard that these things kept getting pushed back and back. And these do have a Made in USA stamp. It's just this one was stamped so lightly, you can't make out the entire thing. That's crazy. Come on, Gibson. You can get better with that. Like, I'll write them a pass sometimes on like the big, heavy, thick gloss finishes, but if this was a gloss finish, you wouldn't even see that at all. All said and done, wow. 6 pounds, 4.5 ounces. I think he was saying his was 7.2. Mine's a whole pound lighter than his. So perhaps there's some variation in these as well, but I mean, this is a really light example. So let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how this one sounds. The pickups are phenomenal in this guitar. Now that I've played it a little bit, this is such a silky, smooth neck. Like, there's satin finishes, and then there's kind of like the whole semi-gloss nature. I mean, these things gloss up real quick, and then you start losing your finish, but this feels really comfortable in my hands. So, in that aspect, this is just a knockout. I'm really enjoying the tones out of this, too. So, let's go ahead and go through our pickups, starting with our neck. Digging the neck and the middle positions on this thing. Very clear and articulate. But nice and chimey in that middle. Now that we know all about the new Rick Beato Les Paul, what are my final thoughts on this thing? I hate to say it, but I just feel let down, you know, after waiting this long and this is what we got. I know some of it comes down to artist preference. I mean, he was never saying it's going to be this big, huge, crazy thing, and I didn't really follow along too much with him because, you know, I like to leave things as a surprise. But waiting a year and a half for essentially just a reissue of what they just did with those double cut Les Pauls that were back then between $700 and $1,000 brand new, this thing for $2,000, it just... I honestly could not suggest buying this guitar, but that doesn't matter anyways. They sold out, so who am I to judge? So I'm glad some proceeds of these are going to charity, because otherwise I really just couldn't figure out why these are as expensive as they are. Now the next part, it's just my own personal opinion on how this guitar could have been improved to kind of make it more so worth the $2,000 price point. But remember, Rick spec'd this out the way he wanted it. But I think an ebony fretboard on this would have been really sweet, and it would have transformed the whole look of this. Maybe we could have did the body as a full-on gloss finish and then just left the neck alone, since that's what a lot of players like. And if you want to get really crazy, maybe put a black stinger on the back. It is a really cool guitar though. It feels great to play. It's got the good pickup tones. QC was pretty solid on this. The binding only had minimal marks on it. I didn't really see too much of anything in that aspect. However, at the end of the day, I'm very happy and glad this exists, because there's a lot of people who might not sell out stadium tours that also deserve signature guitars. And now his fans have something that they can buy, collect, you know, have the guitar that he uses in some of his videos. I mean, it's cool in that aspect. So that's how I feel about this thing. I want to know how you guys feel about it. Leave me a comment down there, and we will catch you guys tomorrow on the next episode. Take care.